Good afternoon and welcome to the latest edition of the Battlestar Galactica franchise documentary. And I'm delighted to be joined by Michael Trucco to talk about his role as Samuel Anders in Battlestar Galactica. Michael, I was speaking to a few cast members there so far in the series, and I suppose from the time of started filming to the time of finishing, you're roughly talking a decade or more now since you were on set in terms of Battlestar Galactica. Does it almost feel that long, or does it feel like yesterday, or just do you really feel the sense of time now?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of the latter. I feel it feels like ages ago, but what's strange is the dichotomy of that is at the same time, so many of us are still in such close contact. You know, I see James Callis and his family, and Tricia Helfer and Katie Sackhoff and Eddie Olmos and Mary McDonnell, Aaron Douglas, Tomo, the list goes on and on. We're all so deeply ingrained in each other's lives that in that sense, no time has passed. But when you think about it, when we look back, you're right, it's better than 10 years since the last shot of Battlestar Galactica. We finished The Plan, I guess, was the movie that kind of ended it all. And Eddie was directing that. And that was, I think, 2008. And here we are in 2020. So we're looking at 11, 12 years since it's been. And in that sense, yeah, I would say I do feel the time. It's like it's a different era. It's a different time in my life. And I miss it.
And Michael, I suppose when most of you were starting off, you were a young cast, apart obviously from Mary and Edward and Colonel Saul as well. Most of you were starting out in terms of actors and making your sort of way. You all sort of blossomed over Battlestar Galactica, and I suppose under the guidance of Mary and under the guidance of Edward, what was that sort of like? Because they probably took a good lot of you under their wing in terms of season one, in terms of getting you involved for what was to be a long project.
Yeah, my experience is unique in that I joined the cast in season 2, okay. Early on in season 2, in what was originally meant to just be a recurring role, which means in the parlance, a recurring role might be 2 or 3 episodes in a season, and that would be it. It's a character who comes on, he has a storyline, and then don't let the door hit you in the ass on the way out, and we'll never see him again. And that character evolved as we were shooting. So I had a slow introduction into the family of Battlestar Galactica, and I came to the table a little bit late. And for those reasons, I always felt a little bit of an outsider. And that was completely self-imposed. I want to be clear that they made it extremely a very warm environment was by everybody. And you're right, it was led by the elder statesmen like Eddie Olmos, Mary McDonnell, Michael Hogan. I learned a lifetime of my craft and acting in those 4 or 5 years that I worked on Battlestar Galactica, because it was a lesson. For me, it was a master craft lesson in acting and in storytelling, and watching the likes of Eddie Olmos and Mary McDonnell. My God, I would be on a set, the camera would be on me, and it would be Mary McDonnell on the other side of it. She wasn't even on camera, and she would be doing her speech, and I was like, I'm sorry, can we go again? I got lost. She was so good. Eddie was so good. There was such a level of talent on that show that was mesmerizing. And I knew about 4 or 5 episodes into this thing that I was part of something special, and it forced me to raise my game as an actor.
And Michael, one thing, speaking to Eddie there the other night, he mentioned about the set, the location, his involvement in sort of tinkering sort of things and sort of making it sort of look authentic in terms of the what was big, massive, I suppose, airplane sort of hangars and lockers. The first time you walk in the set, Eddie said that if you didn't know about it, you could easily get lost. It was that much of a maze. What was it like for you walking in there the first time?
I got lost. I just did. No hyperbole. I got into that set. Most times you get onto a sound stage and they create a set with what they call the fourth wall missing. You have, it's proscenium. You have stage right, left. You have the upstage, and then the cameras are here, and it's a set. You walk on, and there's a control center, and there's a hangar. This was a practically built set to look like the inside of the Galactica, which meant there were corridors. And off those corridors were small little capillaries that led to other sets, and they were purpose built. So you could walk down the corridor, you could make a right down here, another left into a door, and you'd be in someone's office. You'd have to turn around, go out of there, go down the corridor, go to the CIC. There was, it was crazy. And the first time you walk it, you look around and you're like, well, I thought I can't, was it? And then, you know, somebody eventually would go, here, follow me. You got to go this way. That all adds to the texture of the show, the fabric of the show. When you feel you're ensconced in an actual set, I felt like I was standing on the Galactica, that just informs the story that much more. You know, it took it to another level. And you got to remember, we were a relatively low budget show on a relatively low budget network at the time called Sci-Fi, and we were on Friday nights at 10 o'clock. You know, this wasn't like this was some massive, you know, world renowned, huge of nowadays HBO or Netflix level type show. This was a little show for Netflix, and the production value I thought was exceptional. What they were able to do with the budget this show had was phenomenal. I mean, it really, Eddie would probably tell you that the authenticity in the sets and the detail of the props and the costumes, and it was really, all of those things go towards informing the actor about the environment in which you exist, and it just helps tell the story.
And in terms of your introduction, we saw as your character sort of developed, they sort of pitched you very much with sort of Starbuck, Katie Sackhoff, and that sort of interaction. And when did you become clear that they wanted to go in that sort of direction in terms of Anders and sort of Starbuck for you, when you started notice the scripts coming in, that you found yourself, your character, more and more aligned with Katie Sackhoff's character?
I would say, so my original stint, I was hired for 2 episodes in season 2, and I want to say it was, I remember the name, I think it was episode 4, episode 5, I think 3 or 4 or 5, somewhere around there. I entered the field, and I sort of entered this storyline with Starbuck. And the idea was that, you know, clearly her character, you have Starbuck and Apollo are forging this sort of will they, won't they romantic relationship. And a common literary device is to enter a third wheel, a triangle, you know, a foil. Yeah. So that was the purpose of this character, was to just be a guy that was going to upset the balance between Starbuck and Apollo. And I knew that I was just there for a limited amount of time, but something happened, the chemistry, and you hear actors use these terms, you know, almost to a point of cliche. And the chemistry is something that there's an energy between the 2 actors. And Katie and I had this chemistry that doesn't always necessarily imply a sexual chemistry. It just means that there's a something between the characters, and it also, you know, correlated to us as people. First of all, I was in complete awe. This is a girl, she's 10 years my junior, okay? And I felt like I was getting a class in acting. She's extraordinary, you know, and this is 12 years ago, so she was just a kid, and I felt like she was acting circles around me, and so right off the bat I was like, holy crap, I got to raise my game. This girl's the real deal. But I think something happened that translated on screen, and Ron Moore and David Icke and the team of writers were watching, and they're like, I think there's more to be mined from this character. So they added a couple of episodes after I'd already gone back to LA, and I said, oh good, I'll come back up for another 2 episodes. And then it was, well, it might be 3 episodes. I was like, oh, great. And then it was like, well, it could be 4, but definitely not more than 5, maybe 6, could be 7, but not more than 8, you know. And then what was happening?
Ended up 36.
Yeah, they were trickling in a couple episodes here, a few more in season 2, and then they just need you for the first 3 episodes of season 3, but that's going to be it. And I was like, okay. So I was just kind of, you know, jogging along, and then just, like you said, the script started coming in, and I was starting to get more ensconced with the storyline, and I was realizing, wow, this is blossoming into something bigger. But you never take anything for granted as an actor. You always just, you know, every day could be your last, every episode can be your last, and you have to tread lightly. So I didn't take anything for granted. And then eventually, I think through early season 3, it became apparent that Ron had decided that this was going to be a story that he was going to explore. And they approached me with a deal to stick around and get folded into the cast as a series regular. And I got to tell you, man, my life, you know, took a turn for the better on that day. That was really something that is in this business, you know, talent is a part of what we do, but there's a lot of luck in this business, man. And the two often have to collide. And I consider myself very lucky, very fortunate, and very grateful for getting to be part of this family.
And I suppose, Michael, one thing speaking about Grace Park, and I asked her about the sort of the Cylons and I suppose the green scale and what they can do with sci-fi. But she actually told me they started actually building the actual Cylons. They were actual sort of robots and they are 6 feet tall. Towards the season on, they actually started building them and sort of what they sort of look like. And what was that sort of experience when you first came across this? Must have been like, is this a big talking RoboCop or something like that?
It's very much like RoboCop. I love the reference. I'm a huge fan of RoboCop, Paul Verhoeven's RoboCop. Again, it was just a testament to the quality of the production designers, the set designers, the props, the engineers, everything that went into the show. Because generally, when you have something like a Cylon, and we still use it interchangeably, but they put something called a C-stand, which is basically just a tripod, and they stick a yellow tennis ball, or they put a piece of tape on there. And then, of course, they CGI all the effects in post-production. And for the actor, you're looking at a metal stand, and you're like, oh, and you have to react to a metal stand. They started building these things.
Yeah, I heard that, John.
You know, while they weren't fully animated, but, you know, movie, but they were starting to build these things, and at 7 foot plus, man, they were fucking intimidating. It was scary, you know? And it really, it kind of ups your game. You see these Centurions, and it was pretty cool. You know, again, that's just, you know, look, we were all kids playing in a sandbox. That's really what we get to do as actors. We're just, you know, you just hope that you never grow up and we get to play. And this was a really beautifully well-crafted sandbox.
And I suppose one thing about sort of Battlestar Galactica is there was all sorts of storylines in it and all sorts of things, from people with drug problems to people with drink problems to people with depression and mental issues. We saw the character Officer Douala commit suicide, Candice McClure's character. So some real deep sort of dark issues in terms of real life issues for what was a sort of sci-fi, which is probably a bit different from the original Battlestar Galactica was back in 1978. We were going to go jump into planes and we're going to have these massive air battles, which was the original series. This is an awful lot of these storylines were people living on the ship and stories that happened within the ship that didn't involve any sort of air fighting episodes, if you get my drift.
Absolutely. And again, that goes back to Ron Moore. I mean, you can attribute 100% of that to Ron Moore. This is a story about the human condition. And Jamie Bamber, you know, famously for playing Apollo, who's such a great speaker and so smart. He's crazy smart. I always give him credit for this reference because we were at a convention and we were doing a Q&A and a question came up like this similarly. And Jamie said, let's be honest, he said, Battlestar Galactica is a period piece. It's a period drama. And we always think of period dramas traditionally as set in the past and, you know, 15th century and powdered wigs and on horseback and castles, because we think of period drama. But a period drama just means it's a drama set in a particular time. This period just happened to be set in the future, and the setting was outer space. And the main location was a spaceship. So there implies the sci-fi nature was satisfied by that. But it was deeper than just a sci-fi show. You know, so like the original was, it's very polarizing. There's fans of the original Battlestar and there's fans of our version, and there's some that cross over, but oftentimes people are polarized by the two. Some people would rather lean into the more traditional sci-fi tropes, you know, lasers and mylar capes and a lot of space aliens and stuff. Ours was more a story of the human condition. It's a period drama. I mean, it was a drama dealing with dealing with religion and imperialism and war and the social discourse, all set in the guise of a sci-fi show. And that's what happened is people started discovering it. And I think that's what attributes to the longevity of the show and why we still have such a strong fan base and why it's considered part of the pantheon of the golden age, or now the platinum age of television, is that it went deeper than just mylar capes and laser beams and aliens. It really spoke to the human, all those things that you just brought up, real world issues, suicide and alcoholism and religious discord. Those are powerful. And war and imperialism, those were especially at the temperature of the world at the time in the early 2000s. We were in the midst of Afghanistan and Iraq, and a lot of the themes of our show were reflecting what was happening in the real world. And some people were taken a little bit off guard by that as they got into season 3 and 4. They're like, wait a minute, what the hell, you know? And I think that really speaks to Ron's vision and his, you know, lack of a better term, his genius. I know that's a word that's bandied about a lot, but Ron Moore definitely displays genius in his execution of Battlestar.
And speaking to Eddie Olmos, he told me that when he signed on for Battlestar Galactica, he'd written into his contract that at any stage that aliens or giant space monsters would appear on the show, that he was out of there, basically, as such that he could do with a sort of a robot, sort of man-made enemy, but that was the only sort of enemy. And I know some sci-fi shows they try and I know a classic sci-fi show, for example, like Stargate SG-1, who had numerous sort of enemies. They started out with mortals, and then they went on all sorts of different enemies. But Battlestar Galactica, it was the one enemy for the whole entire 4 seasons. It was a human-made sort of enemy. No, even though they were in outer space, there was no talk of going against these dragon or mystical creatures. It was almost since that we wanted to keep it the one subject the whole time.
You know, 2 things on that. A, God bless Eddie. I hope and dream that I'll have a career one day where I can make mandates and dictates like that before I can do a job and go, here's the deal. I don't want to see any red walls on any set, anywhere I go, and no pictures of daisies. Or, you know, like I would just love to be able to have that kind of clout, because you know what? Eddie does, and he can, and he earned it. But he did us, you know, listen, it wasn't just because of that. Ron had already had, obviously, his vision in mind, but it did the show a service, because Eddie was right. He goes, I don't want to be a part of something where we're fighting 3-headed dragons and gargoyles that mystically show up. It just added to the narrative of the show. We had one enemy, we had one focus, and that concentrated the drama. And that's what differentiated it from so many shows like those other ones. And there's room for all those shows. I don't discount things like Stargate. I mean, my God, nobody has to. Look at Star Trek and Stargate have a huge legacy, a huge following, and deservedly so. It's just that Ron and, of course, Eddie wanted to be part of something that was going to be slightly, you know, off kilter, off course from that standard sci-fi trope. And, you know, I'm glad he did. You know, because I don't have that kind of luxury. I've been happy to be a part of the show. I don't care if, you know, I got eaten by you know, the Loch Ness monster himself. I'd have been like, fine, I'm just happy to be here. But it's great that Eddie's like, yeah, I don't want to do this if it's got aliens. That's just classic Eddie almost.
And I suppose that Michael, in terms of the following, he started off in British Columbia, sort of a project filming Battlestar Galactica. I suppose you were hoping for popularity within Canada, United States, and that was. But to see the show being voiced in Spain, Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, Ireland, Germany, France, all these channels, different, obviously being subbed into their own sort of languages, see the real ones getting played. Has it sort of morphed your sort of thoughts at the time in terms of the global spread of what you see of the show? And obviously there's new audience members that probably are fans of Battlestar Galactica and watching it, that probably weren't even born when you were actually shooting the show.
Yeah, that's the thing. You touched on something that's really interesting, is that I would say that, and I don't know, I'm going to throw a random statistic that has no scientific base, but like 75% of the people that are fans of the show discovered it after its original run. When we would do a lot of these appearances at conventions, you know, sci-fi conventions, things like that, Dragon Con, Comic Con. And I've always loved to talk to the fans as they come up, and I always ask, they always say, oh, you know, big fan, love the show. And I say, great. Big fan of the show when it was on Sci-Fi, or did you watch it on DVD or Netflix or however it was and just binge it? And I'd say, you know, 9 out of 10 people will tell you they binged it. They watched it, you know, they got the DVDs or they watched it on Netflix.
The box set.
So often somebody would go, oh no, we used to watch every Friday night. We had a very, you know, we were just a modest little show doing 1.8 million people, you know, a week when it was running on air, when it was in its first run. It wasn't until the ancillary life that this thing really started to blow up. And that's part of that globalization you're talking about. I get still to this day fans from, like you mentioned, Brazil, Germany, Finland, like just like places that you're like, what, you guys have seen the show? It's just crazy that how this little story has gone global. And none of us, I don't think, had thought of it at the time when we were making it, that it would have that reach. I think there was a moment, I think, that the show won a Peabody Award, and I want to say it was included in the Time magazine issue. And something there was something that there was some kind of legitimate first rate press that we got, that we went, I think the show might actually is becoming something important. But that's the beauty of it, right? Is that we were making a show without having the impetus. We didn't have the stigma of being a super important show. We were setting out to make something. We were just making a show. There was no expectation at the beginning. I think that's better.
Yeah. And I suppose, Michael, you mentioned Ron Moore there, and I suppose one thing was very clear about Ron Moore. He had a very definitive terms of what the beginning of the show would be like, and what the end of the show would be like, in terms of the hero character, Adam, leading the crew to find Earth. Do you think that basically every angle was sort of covered, that going forward, in terms of if someone wanted to do, say, in 2022, a Battlestar Galactica movie, or do another spin-off series, do you think there's any sort of room or scope? Because you sort of left no stone unturned, so it's very hard for someone to come in there with probably a different angle, a different viewpoint of Battlestar Galactica, and probably still get that sort of following that she did, or sort of, because obviously they say if it's not broken, don't touch it. The terms we all know, like the Anchorman movies, Anchorman 1, such a classic,
What a great reference, and then they ruined it. And they should never, exactly. Just leave a gem. Yeah. Don't try to break off a little piece and replant a seed. That's a bittersweet subject, because to directly answer your question, I think there is one angle that could be explored. Mary McDonnell and I have talked about this at length. I won't divulge exactly what we're thinking, because I think there's actually something to be mined from it. But conversely, I think a lot of the story was wrapped up, and it would be very difficult to place would it be a prequel? Would it be a sequel? Where would you find a place for it? I think there was great opportunity right after the show was done for us to have gone back and re-explored it. I still think it would be a massive event if there was just another one-off 6-episode. Can you imagine a Comic-Con announcement where the stage goes up and that famous Last Supper picture, and then that screen goes up, and then we all, or 14 of us, and we stand up, and it's battle, and like they just announced a 6-episode. I mean, whoever would carry that, Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, whoever would be smart enough to pick that up, would have a huge influx if they just did 6 more. Now, there is a movie in the works. There's a new series in the works. And none of it has anything to do with us. None of us are included. And I think that's a mistake. I mean, I have no fear in saying that. I think that's a mistake. And I think, people are going to tune in because of the title, because of the name, because of the product, it has value. But I think it's a mistake that they're exploring all these new iterations of Battlestar and not including any of us, and not. I mean, my God, how do you not want to invite somebody like Edward James Olmos back, or Mary, and and have them be a part of this retelling? We had such a built-in loyal audience, and to reimagine the product it's bittersweet for all of us involved, because we feel like we're part of a legacy. That's great, but I feel like it's a mistake. I feel like they should have explored us, and tapped into some of the stories that we were doing. But look, those are decisions that are made well above my pay grade. So I have no idea.
And I suppose, Michael, lastly for me, just hardest question to finish off. If someone put your character, Samuel Anders, and they put it into a Battlestar Galactica sort of dictionary, and they left 2 blank sentences underneath the character's name, Samuel Anders, and they asked you, Michael Trucco, to write those 2 sentences as your portrayal of Samuel Anders, what was he like? What would you like those 2 sentences to read?
Loyal to a fault. Yeah, I would say loyal to a fault. And a hero in name only. I feel like that it's an easy, those aside, that it's easy to paint, Anders was supposed to be fighting for he was just an athlete. That was a character who was forced into a situation that was always wanted to play Anders with a sense of confusion and fear, which is very unpopular for, male characters. We want to be badasses. And I think there was a lot of that, but the reality is that was a terrifying situation for Anders. And the world that he knew was changed and was all blown up. And so I always played him with a sense of confusion and fear and a fish out of water. He wasn't a born hero. He was an athlete. He's a professional athlete. And next, he finds himself part of a resistance. And he was loyal to his wife. He fell in love, and then he had discovered his whole new existence. But man, that's a really good question. I would probably leave one of those sentences blank with just an ellipsis. To be continued. Okay. How about that?
Okay. On that note, Michael Trucco, a pleasure talking to you.
Always pleasure to talk to you as well. Thank you for having me.